The consciousness inhabiting the Rapier of the last storm is as old as Doomed Alissar itself, if not, in fact, older, a being of pure chaos forged into a coral blade in a time itself already long forgotten, with techniques equally lost to the eons. And in this state between timelessness and infinity, the blade does perceive things somewhat differently, the passage of cycles of little interest to it until things start heating up. And whenever that happens, there emerges in the fast-moving blur of little lives blipping around it, forgettable and meaningless, a single bright beacon, the new bearer of this blade, the connection to whom the Rapier already anticipated long before the bearer themselves was born. It is a pattern that repeats with each cycle of the world as law and order duke it out and one side gains the upper hand for the next coming millennia. And so when the ship bearing Oksana arrived in port in Beleth Nagar, the blade thus imprisoned there, waiting for its bearer, saw it again, the beacon of bright light, and all the webworks of connections that bound this fated figure to the apocalyptic events about to unfold. Hello friends, Anderson here, welcome back to Oksana, Thief, Gladiator, Queen. It is time for a new adventure as we close out the old, and perhaps like the video, subscribe to the channel, etc, while we're at it. And that means we'll note down for both Oksana and Gaha the Leviathan Hunt as our next story. We need the amount of stories to match our current level for advancement. So in level 1 we need 1 story, in level 2 we need 2 additional stories, in total we need 3, so we're 1 away from leveling up again. Marking it down as Leviathan Hunt and embarking upon the next quest. Now, I alluded in the intro sequence here that our blade, our Rapier of the last storm, has somewhat of a fated connection to Oksana, and that her destiny as the bearer was already predetermined, because that's how things in sword and sorcery often go. And since it's a blade of chaos that can sense the ripples of connection and all of the butterfly effects about to come to fruition from whatever action Oksana takes, and also clued into the whole struggle of order and law on this Doomed Alissar, I am going to Deus Ex Machina this blade to make it so we can actually bring a bit of randomness into what our next adventure is going to be, because I was a bit dissatisfied with just extrapolating that Oksana was going to go now and try and reach her father Drengur before Hjalmar could. So I'm going to call a bit of a mulligan on this one and decide that while this is what Oksana is planning, the Rapier of the Last Storm might have some other ideas and might decide that from a perspective of building a champion of chaos, a thief turned gladiator, which still needs to happen, turned queen, the time isn't quite right to meet Drengur, and getting ahead of Hjalmar might not be in the best interest of Oksana's destiny. So the blade is going to throw a bit of a spanner in the works, and we'll see how that goes a little later. But first we still have to decide what happens with our purification vagrant prompt from trying to figure out what Gaha's reward is that she requests from the Deep One ruler. Thank you very much for your contributions there in the comments, by the way. I have thought about it and picked up on some of the aspects, and I think it comes down to some kind of burden from her past. A curse, maybe, or what I was thinking of, maybe also an exile, so perhaps purifying her vagrancy in a sense of having been cast out could be an option. And since I can't or don't really want to decide on my own between curse lifting and vagrancy, we leave it up to the dice again. So we'll ask the Dark Gods Oracle, rolling 1 dice 6 because they are probably equally likely. Is the purification that our vagrant Gaha seeks related to a curse? The dice say hell no, so she was exiled for some transgression, and while her clan, the Khalidim, were moving on between the presumably Dust Empire and the land of the Black Pyramids, she had to leave. She had to perhaps even relinquish her own freedom and join this troop of wandering gladiators, pit fighters. But she assumes that through the Deep One Majesty's diplomatic connections to either whoever rules the Dust Empire or the pharaoh of the first pyramid of the land of the Black Pyramids, she can maybe have a pardon negotiated. I think we can assume that the Deep Ones of the last city are powerful enough to do this, and so that in our scene, just to round off the last adventure, as they're all standing there lined up, and Oksana has just shocked the majority of those present by requesting the Rapier of the last storm that is currently being brought forth to her, Gaha speaks up and asks for little more than the right to return home, and seeks that the Deep Ones send forth emissaries to request this from whatever diplomatic counterpart is involved. Let's say it's the pharaoh of the land of the Black Pyramids, and the wish is granted, so we can assume that Gaha is now allowed to go home. And fast forwarding a bit perhaps to that sequence after, and once the dust is settling down and Kynric is taking possession of the ship and recruiting a crew from the portside dives that are here in Beleth Nagar, featuring all kinds of recruitable crewmates. As in any major port, we also assume that ship that Kynric gets is like a trade-in ship of some sort, so they're not giving them a Deep One vessel, which is probably quite difficult for him to control. They're giving him a sleek, fast, mobile, combat-ready vessel that they have acquired somehow. And while Kynric is busy, Gaha and Oksana are conversing, and Oksana, maybe a bit alarmed, asks whether, "Does this mean you're going home now?" And Gaha scoffs and says, "I will not, but it is good to have the option." And bearing in mind the information shared by the Rapier of the Last Storm with Oksana, this is also probably where she drops this knowledge that she is convinced that these seemingly harmless-looking, childlike sages, one of whom is accompanying her half-brother Hjalmar, are in fact in league with the theocracy and are behind the occupation and conquest of Tarentus. And despite perhaps Gaha's protestation of "how can you be sure you can trust this whispering blade?" she has that deep conviction of that connection, and she knows this to be true and not to be a manipulation, which of course can be a manipulation of itself. And so acting on that also hatches this plan that her half-brother cannot be trusted, and they should steal away in the dead of night together with Kynric and race towards the land of the Northern Raiders to make it to Drengur before Hjalmar is able to do so with his army, because now that army is in the hand of the enemy by means of this advisor that he allows to whisper in his ear. And we can also regain our various usage dice and hit points and such, perhaps getting to the point where our next adventure starts by following a bit of a montage where first Oksana and Gaha hatch this plan to steal away in the dead of night, and then they find Kynric, who is surrounded by his new crew, and they have this short, intense conversation with their captain, who doesn't really have any other pressing engagements, having lost his charter with the Merchant League, and rolls his eyes and says something along the lines of, "Well, let's make haste. At least life isn't boring with you two around." And without Hjalmar wisening up to their scheme, or perhaps with the advisor knowing about but not telling him, because this butterfly effect ripple kind of seeing in the future goes both ways, and both sides kind of see the benefit in this potential disruption of Oksana's plans. The little group steals on board of the ship, and as darkness falls over Beleth Nagar in this crescent-shaped natural island harbor, one single small vessel pulls out, crosses the still water, and makes off into the night. And that's when the Rapier of the last storm channels its connection to the storm and has some other ideas, and a gale of supernatural intensity clouds the previously clear sky and casts the vessel on a course that it very much did not intend. And that's where we have a look at our map. So we are currently in the last city of a dying species, and the territory of the Northern Raiders is actually quite close. We would imagine that we have to go over here to this river or fjord and perhaps sail up for a while. But now that this supernatural storm breaks out and carries this ship without damaging it to a completely random destination, that's exactly what we're going to partake in. I have recreated our random location region table because I lost the other one, and we're gonna roll a die 6 and a die 8 to figure out where exactly we're going to end up, because that, I think, is gonna make our next adventure quite a bit more interesting. We're getting a 6 and an 8. That means we're going to the Dust Empire. Okay, so perhaps back to Genaha's roots, perhaps where she first started out as a pit fighter, even if her tribe is more settled here in this border region between the Land of Black Pyramids and the Dust Empire. Let's roll a die 6 for a Dust Empire adventure seed to work with. 4. One of the last dragons is imprisoned beneath the Empire's capital, yearning for revenge. Okay. And maybe that means our dragon is known to the Rapier of the last storm, which now creates this forceful wind that tosses Heinrich's new ship around, that makes the crew and its passengers miserable for possibly weeks at a time, and they quickly figure out that something unnatural is going on, and the crew is already muttering of curses and possibly throwing these passengers overboard. And of course Heinrich, also having overheard this last storm aspect of this weapon that Oksana is now carrying, puts 2 and 2 together, but also quickly realizing that they don't seem to be in immediate danger, decides to go with the flow somewhat. And instead of asking Oksana to throw her rapier overboard, decides to effectively see where it takes them. And it takes them all the way down here to the shores of the Dust Empire. We should know a few more things about the Dust Empire now that we arrive there. And I believe we do have a vested interest in knowing the alignment of the Dust Empire and the political situation. So let's roll a die 6 for the political situation first. It is corrupt. And attitude, it is neutral. So we have an empire here, perhaps indolent and corrupt, very much enamored with its own past glories, not realizing that it cannot forever stay out of this heated conflict that is now sweeping over this world. But for now, they are arrogant enough to believe that this doesn't concern them. And the Emperor, Empress, 1 to 3, Emperor, The Empress has other concerns. A political event has recently happened. 9, a regime change, so the Empress is new to the throne, and faction politics are now in full swing as possible pretenders emerge and the existing factions all try to curry favor from the new monarch. Now, where does that leave us? Is the Dust Empire's capital in the desert, or is the Dust Empire's capital on the coast? We should ask. It is, I think, somewhat more likely, at least to my mind, that it is in the desert, and so we shall ask our likelihood oracle, and with a 2d6 roll, we pick the highest. Is the capital in the desert? Yes. So let's move it all the way to the center here, and let's give it a name. We roll a die 20. That is a 12 Cultasar. I'm picturing sort of desert plateaus, maybe an oasis, and nothing but sand for miles around, and probably also not a river leading to it. I don't think we can sail there, so is there a river leading to it? It is more likely that there isn't, so we'll be favoring the lower results in this one. No, that's a 2, that's a no. So we have to trek over there from our landing point. And I think we can envision this as a relief after weeks of howling wind and unnavigable storm. The new vessel with its now shaken crew washes up on the sandy shores of the Dust Empire, far from civilization or close to it. Are we near a town? That is a hell yes. So we arrive in or near a town, but how does the hell yes part affect things? Perhaps it's a matter of developing an immediate lead to this dragon that our Rapier of the Last Storm wants to set us up to either free or kill or something, resulting in perhaps an exchange of knowledge or whatever we need to do here with this dragon. I think the blade will not immediately share its plans, so we need to hook our group in a different way, and that hook manifests in this town. I think perhaps this is more of a smaller town, so that's why we didn't immediately run into the harbor. There's just some signs that there are fishing boats stored on this beach when they're not out in the water doing their trade, which they currently are, but this is more like an enclosed village that sits a bit elevated on a rock face above the beach, and something in there will lead us to the story that we're supposed to experience here, and I think that's something to ask the Oracle, but first we would like to have a name for this place as well. 5, Sumabira. And our Oracle, we need a D66, so we need to bring in the different colored dice, and in this case, as always, the red one goes first. 56 quest. Okay, somebody's maybe waiting for us. And what's the subject? 36 inquisitors. That does not sound particularly encouraging. Are we going to run afoul of an inquisition here? Or are the inquisitors maybe seeing us outsiders now arriving on their shores and recognizing it as some opportunity to involve us in their schemes? That sounds like an either-or question again, so I'm going to ask one more time. Is this Inquisition, are these Inquisitors adversarial to us, or do they recognize us as an opportunity? I'll put the adversarial as the point of the question, so are they adversarial to us, yes or no? 4, I think that's a yes, but That is a yes, but. So they are adversarial, but only because they want to pressure us into doing something for them. So what I'm imagining is that the Inquisition will play hardball at first to get us to commit to something in exchange for our lives, freedom, not getting roasted to a crisp, whatever it is they do around these parts. So adversarial, but only as a means to secure cooperation. And with that in mind, I'm gonna say that the storm gives one final push to Kynrik's new vessel, embedding it halfway up the beach in the sand in a way that makes it difficult to dislodge right away again. It will take the crew quite a bit of effort and time, and that is time that they don't have, because as everybody disembarks shaken and on unsteady legs, the gates of the walled fortress town up on the cliff face open up, and a party of 24 riders descend down the slope onto the beach surrounding the stranded vessel. Roughly 20 of the riders wearing dark blue loose-fitting clothing with masks against the dust, and their heads covered as well with a bow slung across the shoulder, saber on their side. Riding horses or camels? What are we picturing here? Is it horses? Yes, but only the 4 other figures dressed in white with golden impassive masks all the way covered up are riding horses. The other 20 roughly are riding camels, and those 4 white-clad are our inquisitors, who Gaha probably recognizes for what they are, right? So I'm calling this lightly. Does Gaha know what this is? Yes, so she will be aware of this Inquisition and its reputation, and as Kynrik and Oksana are already making to grab their weapons, will stay their hand. Do not be fools. This battle we may win, but we will for sure lose this war. And in her mind, she knows this Inquisition never gives up and will chase you all over the world, so she does not want to enter into an armed engagement with them and counsels restraint. So the group lets itself be surrounded and probably be rounded up and pressured to do whatever it is that needs doing that has some relation to the capital and the dragon trapped thereunder. And what that is and how that goes, we'll figure out next time. So thank you very much for watching. I'll catch you then, and bye for now.